Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Emmet, which is one of my favorite tools for web development. It really streamlines and increases your workflow with HTML and CSS and gives you some really nice abbreviations so that you can quickly add your markup and you can quickly add your CSS. And it also gives you some really cool actions, such as quickly commenting out blocks of code and then uncommenting them. So this is something that I think every developer should at least look at and try. If you don't like it, you don't need to use it, but my guess is that if you try it, you're gonna love it because it's gonna just cut out a lot of the crap that you don't want to do. So we're going to take a look at it, mostly the HTML abbreviations, but we'll also take a look at some of the CSS, and I think you'll enjoy it, and let's get started. This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, Dev Mountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time job in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Alright, so Emmet is used as a text editor plugin, and if we go to emmet.io and we go to download, it's going to show you all the different text editors and all the IDEs that you can use Emmet with. Now, installing Emmet is going to be different depending on what you're using. In this video, we're actually going to be using Atom, which is a really nice text editor by GitHub. It's built on Electron, which is a JavaScript platform for building desktop applications. It's one of the most popular text editors for both front and back end development. So that's what we'll be using, but of course you can use Sublime Text, you can use NetBeans IDE, Eclipse, Notepad++. There's third-party support for Visual Studio Code, for PHP Storm, just pretty much any decent editor that is available at this time. All right, so we're going to go into Atom. Just open that up, and what I have here is a folder called Emmet Sandbox, and this will all be available for download. And I have an ABBR HTML file, so abbreviations.html, and I have a bunch of comments here, which is going to be kind of our guide to the abbreviations that we're going to use. And then we also have a CSS file and then an actions HTML file. We'll get into that later. Now, to install Emmet in Atom, it's very easy. All you have to do is go to Settings and go to Install. You can search for Emmet, click on Packages, and you can see I already have it installed. If you don't, you'll see this install button. Just go ahead and click that, and then you'll have Settings, Uninstall, Disable. You might have to restart the editor for it to take effect though. Alright, so once you have that set up, we're going to jump in now. Again, if you're not using Atom, all of the abbreviations are still going to be the same. You're just going to have to install it on whatever text editor you're using. Obviously, I can't go through every single text editor and go through the steps, but it should be pretty easy, especially if you've installed plugins before. So let's start off right here. Now, in the comment, we have the actual shortcode or abbreviation that we're going to type. Now, to trigger our abbreviations, you just hit tab. So for instance, I'm going to go right here and I'm going to hit div tab. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us a beginning div tag and an ending div tag, which isn't really anything special. In fact, in Atom, even if you don't have Emmet installed, it'll do this. But we'll get into the more advanced stuff along the way. But we're going to start at the very bare bones here. So let's say we wanted an H1 beginning and end tag. We could say H1 tab. Okay, so that way we don't have to type out the ending tag and the brackets and all that. Now, there's also shortcodes for longer elements, for instance, block quote, header, footer, button, things like that. So let's say we wanted a block quote, we could do BQ tab. That'll give us a block quote. If we wanted a header, we could do HDR tab. Footer, we could do FTR tab. Button, BTN tab. And you can still do the long version as well. So I could still say header tab, and that'll give us a header as well. Alright, now let's get into adding classes and IDs. So, as you guys know, if you know any HTML, CSS, you know that a class is represented by a dot, and ID is represented by a hash or a number sign. So let's start off by creating an H1 with the class of my heading. So normally you do like div class, and you'd put the name of the class, in this case my heading, and then you'd end the div like that. But with Emmet, what we can do is we can just say, whoops, that was a div. I meant to do an H1, but whatever. If we wanted an h1 with the class of my heading, we can just do h1 dot my heading tab, and that'll give us a class of my heading. So let's say we want a div with the class of my class, so we could say div dot my class tab. All right, now when we're using divs, you don't even have to use the div element. You don't have to type out div dot. You can just do dot my class tab, and it'll give you a div with my class. Okay, now if you wanted to add more than one class onto the same element, that's easy as well. So let's do a div with a class of class 1 and class 2. So we'll do dot class 1 dot class 2 tab, and now it gives us a div with both classes. Okay, just make sure that you attach it right here. You don't put a space and then dot class 2, because that's going to mess it up. All right, just make sure that they're attaching like that. All right, now for IDs, we can do hash, and then let's say we want a div with the ID of my ID. So we'll say hash my ID tab, and that'll give us a div with the ID of my ID. All right, now we can also mix and match IDs and classes. So let's say we wanted a div with both my ID and a class of my class. We could do hash my ID and then dot my class tab, and now you'll see it gives us an ID and a class. All right, and if we wanted to do, you know, more than one class with the ID, we could do my ID and then a class of class 1. Oops, forgot the dot. Class 1, and then another class of class 2 tab, and now we have our ID. We also have two classes. All right, so that takes care of just, you know, the plain element as well as IDs and classes. Now what if we want to add content into our element? So for that we use brackets. So what I'm going to do is go right here, and let's say we want to have an h1, and inside the h1 we want to have the text my title. So for content, we use our curly braces. So we'll say h1 curly braces, my title, and make sure you go to the very end and hit tab, and now we have an h1 with the text my title. Okay, you can also, you know, add a class to the h1 if you want. So we'll say h1.red, and then we'll put our curly braces, and we'll say my red title. Hit tab, and now we have an h1 with the class of red, and it has my red title as the content. All right, this actually shouldn't be here. So what about nesting? What if we want to put, you know, an element inside of an element? So for that, we want to use an angle bracket. So we want to use a greater than sign. So let's go right down here, and let's say that we want a div. Inside that div we want a UL, and then inside that UL we want an LI. So what we would do is take the div, we'll use the nesting character, which is the angle bracket, or the greater than, and then we'll do UL, and then we'll do another angle bracket, and then LI, and then tab. And you can see what that's done. It's created a div. Inside the div, put the UL. Inside the UL, put the LI. All right, so let's say we wanted to put some content in the LI. We could do the same thing. We could say div. Inside the div, the UL, inside the UL, the LI, and then inside the LI we'll just say list item 1, and then tab. And you can see it's put the content inside there. Now, what if we wanted to put more than one LI? Usually when you have an unordered list, you'll have more than one list item. So for that we can use multiplication, and we use the asterisk for that. So let's say we want a UL, we want to give it the ID of navigation, right? And then inside there we want to nest an LI, but we want more than one LI. We want 5 of them. So what we can do is we can say multiply by 5, right? And then we'll put another angle bracket, and then the content that's going to be within it, and I'll just say list item 1. All right, we'll hit tab, and now we have a UL ID of navigation. We have 5 LIs, and inside it says list item 1. Now we can take this a step further. We can actually use an index so that we can access whatever index number of the LI we're on. So instead of doing list item 1 in all of these, let's do 1 through 5. So to do that, same thing, we're going to take a UL ID of navigation, and we're going to put LI times 5, right? And then for the content, we're going to say list item, and then a money sign, which represents the index. So we hit tab, and now we get list item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So just a cool little trick if you want to add an index in there. So we've talked about nesting with the angle bracket with the greater sign or greater than sign. So what about siblings? What about things that are on the same level? So if we look at this UL here, all of these LIs are on the same level. Okay, the LIs are actually a child of the UL, and the UL is a parent of the LIs, but these are all siblings. So let's say that we want to create a div, and then on the same level we want a UL. So for siblings we're going to use a plus symbol. So we'll do plus UL, and then let's do plus LI, and then tab. And you'll see that it created all three of these elements, but nothing is nested. They're all siblings. They're all on the same level. All right, so let's say we wanted to have an H1 with a class of title, and on the same level we wanted to have a paragraph with the class of body. Hit tab, and now we have an H1 and a paragraph with classes on the same level. Now what if we wanted to wrap a div around these? So we can mix and match using, nested elements with siblings. So what we would do is we could say we'll have a div, and then inside that we'll have the H1 with a class of title, and on that same level we'll have a paragraph with the class of body. So now we have a div with an H1 and a paragraph inside of it. Alright, so we can also group things together. So what I'm going to do here is create a div, and then we're going to go ahead and nest in a group. So we use parentheses for groups, and this group is going to have a header, and inside the header we'll have a UL. Inside the UL we'll have an LI. Let's do 2 LIs, so we'll say multiply by 2, and then we'll put an A tag inside the LIs. Alright, then outside the group let's go plus footer. So on the same level as the div we should have the footer, and then we'll nest a paragraph inside there. And I guess in the paragraph let's put some content. We'll just say copyright 2017. Okay, we'll hit tab, and it created all this content, all this markup for us. So we have our div, we have our header and footer, which are on the same levels. The header has the UL with the 2 LIs, the footer has the paragraph. Alright, now we can also add attributes. Now sometimes when you do, for instance, a tab, it'll automatically add an attribute like an href, because you're not going to really see an a tag without an href, at least not very often. So they actually included that by default. But to add custom attributes, you can use brackets. So let's put some brackets here, and I am actually going to use an href as one of these. So we'll say we wanted to go to http google.com, but let's say we wanted to add a target attribute as well. So we would just put a space here and say target equals, let's do blank, and then if we wanted to add a title we could do that as well, like that, and then we'll go in and we'll hit tab, and now you'll see it turns it into an A tag with all of those attributes. And of course it doesn't have to be an A tag, you can add attributes to any element. Alright, so now let's take a look at forms and input. Now before I do this, I want to show you guys a couple resources, because I'm not going to be going over every single abbreviation. So if I go back to my browser, okay, one of them is this cheat sheet. This is at docs.emmet.io/cheat sheet, and this has all the different symbols. You'll see multiplication, nesting, siblings, all the stuff we just went over, but it goes in depth with the different abbreviations. So if you want a color input, a number input, I'm not going to go over every single one, so this is a good resource for you guys. Alright, it's pretty big too, pretty long. Then you have all the CSS stuff. And then you also have a file called snippets.json, which is actually included on your computer if you installed Emmet, and you can actually edit this file. But this is the GitHub page of it, and it's separated into CSS right here, and this has all the different CSS abbreviations. We're going to go over some of these, and then down here we'll have the HTML. Let me just scroll down. right here we have all the HTML stuff. So for instance, BR is going to give you a BR tag, image tags, inputs, all this stuff. So you might want to look into this. We're actually going to add a custom abbreviation in a little bit, but I will get to that in a little bit. Now we're going to take a look at forms and inputs. So if I just say form tab, that gives us an action again, because that's a common attribute and they decided to put that in there by default. Now usually you would want to have a method attribute to say, is this going to make a post request or a get request? So if we want this to be a get request form, we can say form:get tab, and that'll give us method get. Same thing with post. We can say form:post. That'll give us a method of post. Okay. So if we type in label tab, that'll give us a label with a for attribute. If we do input, the default for that is going to be a text attribute. Freaking seagulls. The default's going to be a text attribute, and I'll show you how to change that in a minute. Now if we do INP tab, that'll also give us an input, but it will add a name and an ID, which is very common when you're building forms. Alright, now if we want to change it from a text to, let's say, an email input, we can say input:*email tab, and that'll make it an email. Alright, if we want to make it a submit input, we can do input s tab, and we get submit. And again, you want to check these let's see, these resources here. Let me just show you real quick. So where is it? Looking for the submit right here, input s. Okay, so you can do input s or input submit, and that'll give you the input with the type of submit, also a value. Okay, so this is kind of like a cheat sheet in itself. Now to locate this file, it's going to be different depending on what text editor you're using. I'm using Atom, so it's going to be in my users folder, and then in the user, whatever user, in my case Brad, and then .atom, packages, Emmet, node modules, Emmet, and then lib. And you'll see I have a snippets.json file, and I can go ahead and open that up. Alright, and that's going to be the same file that we just looked at on GitHub. It has all the CSS abbreviations and all the HTML abbreviations. And I'm going to show you how to add a custom one in a minute. So let's move on to, actually let's do a select real quick. So if we say select tab, that'll give us a select tag with a name and an ID. Now we also have extended structures. We can use this plus symbol. So for instance, if I say select plus tab, that'll actually add the option in there, an option tag. If we do table plus, that'll give us table row and table column. If we do OL plus, that'll give us the LI. Same thing with UL plus. All right, so it just adds the inner tags of these elements. All right, so let's take a look at creating a custom alias in the snippets file. So let's say if we go back up here and we look at this right here, we created a div, we have an h1 and a paragraph, class of title, class of body. Let's say we want this to show up if we say post tab. So we want to create a custom abbreviation called post. So what I'll do is go into the snippets file, make sure you're in the HTML section, and then inside abbreviations, let's just go all the way down. Okay, so it ends, yeah, it ends right here. So I'm going to put a comma, and then let's do post. And what we'll do is we'll set this to, let's do div. Oh, need quotes here. So we'll say div with the ID of post, and inside that we want to have an h1 with the class of title, and on the same level we want a paragraph with the class of body. Alright, so that's what we want as our post. So let's go ahead and save this. Now if I try and do it, let me just go down here. If I try and do post tab, it's not going to work because we need to actually restart Atom since we edited that file. So I'm just going to close it up and restart. And then if I go right here and I say post tab, Now you can see we have our little post template. All right. Now you probably would have this, you'd have a lot more markup in here, something that's actually worth you to create a snippet for, or an abbreviation for. But just know that you can do that. All right, another very helpful thing with Emmet is we have doc type and structure shortcodes. I keep calling them shortcodes, but they're abbreviations. For instance, the exclamation, you guys have probably seen me use this quite a bit. If I just put an exclamation and I hit tab, it gives us this entire HTML structure with the doc type, with the HTML tags, the head and body tags, the title, the viewport. It gives us all that stuff just from typing in exclamation tab, which is really helpful. Now by default it's set to HTML5. So if I go down here and I say HTML:5 tab, it gives me the same thing. But we can also set this up for different versions of HTML. For instance, if we want HTML4 transitional, we can say HTML:4T tab, and you'll see it actually gives us the doc type for HTML4, okay, in transitional mode. Now if we look at just go back to the snippets file and we go down right here, you'll see the different options. So HTML5, I showed you that, 4T for transitional, we have HTML4 static, we have XHTML, XML. You can also use Emmet with SVG. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do that I'm not going to get into. You could create a whole course on Emmet, but I want to just show you the basics and fundamentals, the things that I use the most. All right, let's go back to Adam. And now what I want to show you is something else you've probably seen me use quite a bit if you watch my videos, and that's the lorem ipsum generator. So that's the dummy text generator. You'll see if I go over here and I type in lorem tab, it'll give me a paragraph of sample text. Okay, now if I want to limit the number of words to say 10, I can say lorem 10 tab and it'll give me 10 words. Okay, if I say lorem 500 tab, it'll give me 500 words. Okay, and then another cool thing we could do is, let's say we wanted to create an unordered list and we wanted to have 4 list items with different dummy text in each one. So we could easily do that by saying UL, we'll give it a class of myList, and we're going to nest into that lorem 10 dot item, and then we're going to say multiply by 4 and then tab. And what this has done is it's created an unordered list with the class of myList, and it gives us 4 LIs with the class of item, and then we have some dummy text in each LI. Okay, and notice that the text is all different. So this is really good for prototyping and just creating something to look at while you're creating your templates or your UIs or websites or whatever it may be. All right, now for the CSS, I'm not going to really get in depth in this because for one thing, this video is running kind of long already, but the HTML is the most important part that I wanted to cover, at least in this video. So in the CSS file, I have this my element, right? And I'm just going to show you some of the different abbreviations. And again, you want to use that cheat sheet as a reference, but let's go over some of the simpler things. So let's start with the colors. So for color, we can do C:, and then let's say we want this to be black. So color of black, I'm going to say #000 tab, and that'll give us the color of black. We can even use a shorter shortcut and say C #0 tab, because since the color is all zeros, we can just specify 10. If we wanted it to be, let's say, light gray, so F4 3 times, we could say C, and then we can do #F4 tab, and it'll make it light gray. Okay, so that's colors. Let's talk a little bit about positioning. So if we wanted to position this element absolute, we could say P:(A) tab, and that'll give us position absolute. Let's say we wanted to do relative, we could do P:(R) tab, position relative. We can do fixed. We can do, what else is there? Static, so P:(S) would be static. Now if we wanted to set the coordinates, for instance, we want to do top 100 pixels, we can do T100 tab. Now, by default, it's going to do pixels, but you could do percentages if you want. So if we say top, let's do 50p tab. Oh, not top, just T50p tab, and that'll do a 50%. If you wanted to use M's, you could do, actually, let's do it from the left. So we'll say left, not left, just L. Let's see, L, we'll say 3E tab. So that'll be left 3M. All right. So for floating, we could do FL tab, and that'll do float left by default. We could also do FL:L, which will also do float left. We could do float right by FLR. If we wanted to do float none, we could do FLN. All right, and then to clear, we can say CLR tab. That'll do clear right by default, but we could also do what is it? CLR, which would do clear right. We could do CLL, which would be clear left. CLB, clear both, and CLN, clear none. All right, another thing we can do is set the display. So let's say DB, that'll display as block. We could say DI for inline, or DIB for display inline block. For margin, we could say M10 tab. That'll give us 10 pixel margin. We can do specific position, so let's say margin right, so MR10 would be margin right. We could do ML20. Notice I'm not putting the colon, it's not required, but you can. For instance, we can say MB:10, and that'll do margin bottom 10 pixels. And again, we don't have to use pixels. We can say MT1E, and that'll be margin top 1M. Okay, padding, we have the same thing. We can say P:30, or we can just say P30. Okay, that'll both give us padding 30 pixels. If we wanted to do padding top, we could do PT40 padding top, PL, I don't know, 12 padding left. Okay, so just some nice shortcuts. So for sizing, we can do heights and widths. So if we say W100 tab, that'll do width 100 pixels. We could also do percentages. So if I say H, let's say H50p, that'll do height 50%. We could also do H auto, H colon auto, or just H auto. Or maybe H auto doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. My suggestion would be to always use the colon, because sometimes it's not going to work without it. Let's see what else I want to show you real quick. For lists, so if we say list :n, that'll do list style type none. We could do list :c, that would do circle. We have list :s would be square, and so on. Again, you want to look at the snippets file or the cheat sheet, and you can see everything that's available. Let's see, text align. So text align would be TA. So we could do TAL, which would do left. We could do TA:R, which would be right. We can do justify. So TAJ would be justify. We can do text decorations. So if we want text decoration none, we can do TDN. We can do TDU for text decoration underline. Fonts, I think this is really cool, the font family. So let's say we want, let's say FF:A tab, and that'll give us the whole, Arial, Helvetica, sans serif. This is something I hate typing out, so that's really helpful. There's also like FFT, which will give us Times New Roman, some fallbacks, FFV, which will give us Verdana. So font families. We also have font weights. So if we do FWB, that'll do bold. We can do FWN for normal. We can do FW and then a number like 400. Okay, so we can set the font weights that way. We can also do font styles. So FSI for italic, FSU for, not U, what is it, N for normal, and we can do FSO for oblique. All right. And then for important, we can do just an exclamation tab. That'll add the important flag. And what else? We can do combinations. So let's say we wanted to have like padding right 10 plus margin left 5 tab, and it'll add both of those styles. All right, so like I said, there's a ton more. There's animations. There's all types of shortcodes and abbreviations you can use. I'm just going to go ahead and save this. I will have this stuff available in the link in the description. All right, so lastly, I want to get to some actions. Now, I want to advise you that depending on what editor you're using and what other plugins you're using, some of these combination of keys may not work. You may have to go in and change them. There have been quite a few things that have been quite a pain in the ass to figure out and try to change and all that. But I'm going to go over some very basic stuff. This is by no means everything. I would suggest looking at the documentation to find everything. But I think one of the most helpful actions is the commenting. Toggle the comments, which is going to be control and forward slash. So if we go down here to this little bit of HTML that I have, let's say we wanted to comment out this section, we could just highlight it and we can do control forward slash. Okay, if I wanted to comment out this H1, control forward slash. And then if I wanted to uncomment it, just as easy, we just highlight it, control forward slash. Same thing here. And it's not just HTML, we can also do this in CSS. If we wanted to take all of these, you'll see it'll comment out every single line that is highlighted. You want to uncomment it, very, very simple. So that's probably the thing that I use the most as far as these actions go. We can also do this go to matching pair. So if you're stuck and you can't find the ending div or the ending section tag or some other tag, you can do Control Alt J. Now, usually with text editors like Atom, if you hover or if you click on the opening div, the ending one will actually have a line or something under it, or it'll be highlighted. But if you don't have that, you can do, what was it? Control Alt J. So if I hit Control Alt J, you'll see it'll skip to the ending div. If I go on this section, Control Alt J, it'll go to the next the ending of that section. Now another helpful one is to select through items. We can do Control Shift and period, or Control Shift comma to go back. I think that's the order. But let's go ahead and click right here. We'll do Control Shift period, and that's going to go to the next attribute, which is the ID of page. It'll go to the value. Next, it'll go to the next tag, to the key value pair, and then to the value, next tag, and so on. Now you're supposed to be able to do comma, because that was Shift Control period, which goes down. Comma is supposed to go back, but it does not in my case. I think something else is overriding it, but you should be able to navigate up and down. All right, let's see what else. So to move things, if you want to move lines up and down, you can do Control up or down. So let's say we want to take this paragraph and we do Control and the arrow key up and down so we can move things around, which is kind of cool. We can merge lines. So let's see, what's that? Shift Control M. So if we want to take this section and do Shift Control M, it'll put it all basically on one line. Okay, we can also increment values or numbers. So let's go to the CSS and let's say this 100 pixels right here. We'll go ahead and highlight that. Now if I hit Alt and then the up arrow, it'll actually go up by 0.1. Okay, down will go down by 0.1. Now you're supposed to be able to do Shift Control up and down. So Shift Control up, and that does not work for me for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's being overwritten by something else. And then if you want to go by tens, you can do Shift Alt. Shift Alt up. You'll see it goes up by 10. We can go down by 10. You can also basically do some math here, math expressions with Control Shift Y. So for some reason I did like 4 times 5. And I highlight that and I do Control Shift Y, it'll actually perform that arithmetic, which is kind of cool. All right, so I think that's going to be it, guys. We're kind of running out of time here. Now, by no means is this every single thing that Emmet can do. It's just an introduction. I would suggest looking more into it. So don't come hit me with well, what about this and this and this. I know there's more you can do, but this is just the stuff that I personally use it mostly for. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, guys, and I will see you in the next one. So if you guys really like my videos and you learn a lot from them and maybe you have a couple extra dollars to spare, check out my Patreon page. I'm working on creating special content for patrons. You also get special deals on future courses, and there's even an email support tier for all YouTube videos and projects. To learn more, visit patreon.com/traversymedia.